Francis Spiteri has been located alive.
Disaster.
Johnny Spit.
John Spiteri opens his mouth, you and I are fucked.
Fuck.
Guys, just starting off, I'd love to take things back to Gettin Square. You know, in 2003 we meet Johnny Spiteri. He's got his mullet, he's got his tight jeans, he's got his trademark thongs. Stuff that's really become kind of iconic. How did you determine that appearance when you were developing the character for that original film?
Well, for nearly 30 years I've lived not far from here actually, just down the road from King's Cross. So I'd seen many characters like Johnny Spiteri through my life. And when I read the script for the very first time, the script was beautifully written by Chris Nyes, but I could hear the rhythm of the character, and importantly, I could see him. I knew what he looked like. So when we went up to the Gold Coast to start, preparing for shooting this film, the original wardrobe designer had already chosen some wardrobe for the character of Johnny, but as soon as I saw the wardrobe, it's like, that's not him. That's not him. So I said, look, have you got some free time this afternoon? Let's go to some op shops. So most of the wardrobe from Gettin Square for Johnny was sourced out of the Salvation Army op shop on the Gold Coast, and I literally headed for the women's department and the children's department purposely because everything else is slightly smaller, obviously, and I knew in terms of just the relationship of size of clothes to Johnny, it should be look slightly awkward. So that's where it came from.
And, it's quite a big gap between Gettin Square and Spit. I'm curious, how long had there been, rumblings, conversations about another film involving this character?
Well, I think we loved the character, and so it was always somewhere in our minds, but probably, just to put a number on it, about 10 years we started talking about it. And there were very casual conversations between David, me, and Chris and David and what have you, amongst the three of us. And then slowly, sort of over that period of time, Chris started to think about ideas. He came up with a central idea of something he wanted to work on, and then kind of popped. He had this idea of doing something to do with immigration because he thought the whole hullabaloo about it in this country was wildly out of place, and wanted to thought it was a great way to explore it in a little way by popping Spiteri into the middle of it because he's such a unjudgmental, everyman, almost mythological Australian character.
Strangely, Johnny Spiteri to bring common sense to the debate.
Exactly. Very strangely.
That's something that I found interesting in that, normally, your comedic character, which Johnny is, these types of characters are normally best served in that supporting function because your protagonist is normally like your straight man, he's a bit more serious. And in Gettin Square, you see that dynamic between Johnny and Sam Worthington's character, Barry. So was there a particular thought behind we will put Johnny a bit more front and centre in this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely. We always wanted to make a film about Johnny and, in a way, fill out some of his background, fill out where he came from, what he'd been sort of up to. But also, the thing about comedy, I think, is that the straighter you play it, particularly this type of comedy, where you play it as if it's the truth, and there's no sense that the characters are aware they're being funny. And that opens the door to exploring their emotional life and their dramatic life as well. And I think the combination of those two only enrich the comedy.
Yeah, there's slightly different films. Like Jonathan, myself, Chris, we didn't want to do Gettin Square 2.
Yeah, exactly.
That Gettin Square was a crime comedy caper. It's a comedy, but it's a character piece. And we get, as Jonathan said, we explore the world of Spiteri. We get to understand why he is the man he is through his backstory, and we get to explore the world through the eyes and interesting thought processes of Johnny Spiteri. That's what we wanted to do.
Definitely. And although it is a very different film, you do have some returning characters from that first film. The characters played by Gary Sweet and David Field and Helen Thompson. But there's also several characters who we don't see this time, like Timothy Spall and Freya Stafford and aforementioned Sam Worthington. Were there particular conversations, I guess, when you're developing the story, who we bring back into the fold and who doesn't return for this one?
Not really, no. I mean, the way stories, particularly original stories, they unfold. They reveal themselves to you, and in many ways it was about discovering what Spiteri might be up to, which throws up a whole lot of new characters. And again, we didn't want to bring, it wasn't any conscious effort, but we felt like there was some backstory to to tell, and that's kind of the direction Chris went, and we never really went, oh, we should bring this person, that person back. Also, it would be following Gettin Square too much. We want it to be, whilst it's a spin-off and whatever you want to call it, it's a standalone movie. You don't have to see Gettin Square to kind of enjoy this film. I think it's, and I think what we tried to make was something that stands on its own 2 feet, introduces to people who don't know him, Spiteri, as a new character, and that was really our focus.
Definitely, and it's interesting you say that because, a lot of the trailers and the marketing, it leans heavy on the comedy, but there are some unexpectedly, really kind of thunderous, potent scenes. And a key one I wrote down is one of the refugees, Jihad/Jared, he's detailing his suffering, everything that he's experienced on his way to asylum in Australia. And I was curious what your approach was to tackling, such heavy real-world themes amid, your slapstick and your caper.
Well, I think, as I said before, life isn't sort of polarised into this sort of a funny life or a sad life or a dramatic life. It's a melange of it all, and in exploring that world, exploring those characters, we just wanted simply him to tell his story in a way, and so that's what that character does. The fact that you're laughing 5 minutes earlier and 2 minutes later and around it, and that's kind of the truthful approach we tried to take with the whole exercise. And when Jared Jihad sits down and tells his story to the visa board, it's just him relating what happened to him and where he comes from in a very, very truthful and simple way, and it contextualises so much of that whole thing without us having to, in any sort of dogmatic way. We didn't want to make a political film. We wanted to make a funny film. But funny is also sad and melancholic and all these other things, because funny is not just a one-dimensional concept. Why we laugh at stuff is often because it comes out of character, it comes out of truth, and it comes out of other emotions. And that's kind of what we wanted to juxtaposition.
For sure. And one other element I really appreciated was getting to know a bit more about Johnny's origins, especially his relationship with his sister. And when she comes back into his life, I understand that she's sick, but I just sort of assumed that she would be in the story pretty much near the conclusion. And then when she kind of passes on considerably sooner in an almost very subdued manner, it really sort of took me aback. I just didn't see it coming. Could you tell me about, I guess, just sort of setting her up before, not too long after, just quietly moving her away?
I think the wonderful thing about what happens with Julie in the film is it is exactly what you said. It's unexpected. And to me, they're the great things in any sort of storytelling, films, theatre, whatever, is the surprises. And it's wonderful sitting in an audience and just feeling the reaction of the crowd during this particular film. There's moments of, great uproarious laughter, but then pin drop silence because the audience didn't expect that we're actually going to go in a particular direction. That is really satisfying. As a filmmaking team, it's to subvert the audience's expectation is always a good thing.
It's part of this Johnny Spiteri we meet. It's 23 years later. He says in the film, I've run all my life, I'm not going to run anymore. But it's that idea that he has these hurdles that he has to get over, but he has to get over them as not just a junkie survivor. He has to get over them as some sort of, he's grown something, or he's grown some distance since the last film. He's now an ex-junkie trying to, in a sense, not make amends, but make a life for himself. And having to deal with suddenly rediscovering the grief of not having had a sister and not knowing where she was, and the grief of their separation, and then having to losing her again, is a great hurdle for a character to have to deal with. And that's partly where the sort of the richness of that emotion comes from. That it very much, I think, enhances the character.
Definitely, and I think her fate is, I know you've touched on this earlier, but very kind of emblematic of the tone. And obviously it's not a direct sequel to Gettin Square, but when you compare the pair, this one's far more reflective, more weary. It really sort of reckons with the idea of time and aging, and it's a much more kind of, sort of slower tone in that sense, kind of reckoning with who you were as opposed to who you are now, and I guess all that time that's passed through that. I guess, is that something, because funny enough, I don't know, maybe I'm reaching here, but I saw a lot of parallels to the Trainspotting sequel, where you saw those guys 20 years after, and they're sort of reckoning with who they were and what they've overcome, and I guess sort of the scars they've had. Was that, maybe not that title specifically, but was that the kind of mood that you guys wanted to inflict?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. To see the ravages of time on Johnny, and also one of the things that Chris, the writer, would say is just an overall thing. He believes that everybody is a good person at heart, and however, some people along the way, events may occur that alter them in some way, shape, or form, and get them, and then they're forced down alleys or laneways that they wouldn't have expected. And that's what we see with Johnny Spiteri in his past, and now even his present, as you say, with the relationship with his sister Julie, and then having to deal with the grief of the loss of Julie as well. Completely unexpected, and it's real. That's the great thing about it. What you can believe all these things that happen to Johnny, as far out as they are, and as crazy and idiosyncratic and sort of funny as they are, they're also real.
Yeah, and we don't expect Johnny to be the Johnny from Gettin Square. You don't expect to be able to deal with that kind of challenge in a way, emotional challenge, and that's part of what this film is. It's he's aged. He's grown. He's sort of growing up in a funny sort of way, and and the other thing too is, just in answer to what you asked initially, we're all 23 years later, and so we
haven't aged.
Yeah, we haven't changed, and we just wanted to prove to all those, to everyone else that we're how vital we still are. But anyway, we wanted to make something that reflected our experience of life as well, to a certain degree, and that experience, I think, I'm really pleased with in the film.
Definitely. And I guess sort of following on from that, I've seen in other interviews you've conducted, David, that like when you've put the thongs back on and you're back in the wardrobe, it was quite easy to slip back into the character. But this is still an older Johnny. Were there certain modifications you made to the character, if that's like physicality or voice or anything of the sort?
Yes, absolutely. And the audiences mightn't pick up on it, but it was something that I was definitely conscious of. And what aging did, the aging one, first of all, is obviously he does look older. I obviously bring that naturally, but we enhance that as well. And the idea of having a ball patch and whatever was an inspired touch, I thought, from myself and Tess Natoli. The other thing, though, and you've mentioned it, is the fact that he's been clean for that period of time. I've been an ambassador for Wayside here in Sydney for a long time, and I've seen what drugs do to people when they're on the gear and when they're off the gear. And one of the things is actually vocally, and I was aware that it's slightly different. And you may notice that it is slightly different vocally in this. When you're on the gear, it's a very, very, very particular vocal tone, and it's slightly different in this. It shows that he's different. He's clean. He's still he's still Johnny at heart, and you recognise that. But there's subtle differences. Also physically as well. He's slightly more stooped as well, which is not good for my posture after doing it for however many weeks shooting.
I think the other thing too is which I think David's nuanced performance is so great because it adapts those little nuances, those little things that, in a sense, collectively, tell the story of ageing without having to actually have it in the narrative. It's about the fabric of the film, the fabric of the character.
I think too, this film allows us to see different sides to Johnny that we didn't get to in Gettin Square. We see him as a father figure, as a teacher, a bit more of a mate because he isn't the junkie that he was. What was it like, I guess, sort of exploring like different facets to his personality?
For an actor, it was a gift. Because I had so much to work with, and the more I have, the more things I can play with. It literally is, Jonathan sets up a playground essentially for myself and the other actors to create. And I've got to say it was one of the most creative experiences that I've had on set throughout my whole career, because it was like the breadth of sort of time and space to play was just brilliant.
I mean, the ironic thing is that Chris writes a very tight script, but at the same time, by having that foundation, it gives you then the space to be able to go, we might just have 5 minutes, and, David and I have had so many conversations, what would Spiteri be doing now? What would... Just those very loose things, and we, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, but sometimes absolute gold comes out of it, because your commitment to the character and David's commitment to the character allows you just to access it, in a spontaneous way.
Definitely, and it's very much, I guess you could call it a legacy text, and we do see a lot of these where it's like long waits in between seeing other characters. You look at the Bridget Jones film that just came out, like the Blade Runner from a few years ago, these really long periods in between films. And a lot of them, it's very customary to see certain callbacks to their iconic moments or iconic shots from the previous film. Obviously, in this one, we have Johnny back in the courtroom, which was a brilliant scene in Gettin Square, but also certain shots. I noticed that you replicated when De Beers has Sam Worthington's head on the table and he's right of frame, and this time it's the same but with Johnny. I'm curious, Jonathan, how do you know when to pay homage to what's been done before, but also to be wary that you're not, repeatedly replicating to the point where it's kind of a little too much?
I've worked with Gary Phillips, the DOP, for many years, 30 years now, and we sort of we have a shorthand. It's a conversation between David and I as we're on the set. It's all sorts of combinations, and to be honest, I don't think about now's the time to pay a homage or whatever. I might have an idea that this would be good, but in the end, we just have this. I say to Gary, what do we like, and what works, what instinctively feels right for the moment, where the character is, where we put the camera, and with. There's a subtle difference between how you shoot drama and comedy. Comedy, you want to give it some space. You don't want to be too fancy with your camera work and all the rest of it. It needs to, for example, in the courtroom scene in Gettin Square, I had a lot more of a moving camera. In this one, the thing I learnt from there is the comedy is like a slow burn, and in that courtroom it bubbles up, and if you just sit there and watch it, is the most enjoyable way to do it. And we did a bit more of that this time, for example. With his head on the table, I just thought it was a really good little tick to the other one without ever making a big deal about it. So it's more of an instinctive thing, I prefer to work that way. I think and plan in advance a lot, but without sort of cementing it to us, because on the day all sorts of things happen. Suddenly you thought you were going to shoot that way, but you're going that way. It's sunny and not raining or whatever. It's so many factors, and I think you get to a point in our age and careers and all the rest of it where you want to allow yourself to trust the process, basically, and that often reveals a huge amount to you because you've done the prep and you've done all the other things.
Sure. With Johnny, we've seen how he's changed and how he stayed the same over the course of 22 years. I would love to know how you've seen each other change and remain the same.
Oh, God. I don't. I haven't seen Jonathan change, in all honesty. We've done, besides physically, but it looks we've known each other and worked together for, nearly 30 years now?
Nearly 30 years, yeah.
So it's just been an ongoing thing, and in terms of the relationship, it's a brilliant relationship because it's completely open and honest, and we have a great dialogue, and on set it's fantastic. It's just, it's talk between each other, best idea wins. It doesn't matter where it comes from, we will go there. Yeah. But in terms of change, no, I can't really think of anything, really.
Yeah, I in a funny sort of way, it's exactly the same as it was, and I think that's why we work together. I always felt that we we hit it off straight away. We found a good place to exist together in, and when we were still getting to know each other on the first film, and then, but it just seemed to organically work. And I think that's what's great about when you work in creative ways is you don't necessarily connect with everybody. And with David and I've just felt like we have a shorthand. We're able to just, and as he said, it's the best idea wins, and it's that thing. It's about being greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, completely.
And that's what I really like that, and I feel as if that's what we sort of bring to the party.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys so much for the time. Thanks for allowing me one more question, and we'll do this again in another 22 years.
22 years, we'll see you. Yeah, we'll be in the aged care facility.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Cheers,
guys.
good on you. Good on you, mate. Thank you.
Spit opens in Australian cinemas on the 6th of March. And remember, like it, follow it, right here at Switch.